Ebusianfo masan so atena se aha Ghanatube so ensem ne de edoso nya ekoso ewo oman Ghana mu ene ye kase ye beka ye mfiri hanim se adofo ensem a ekoso ebi ne yenkotie.
Well, welcome back to The Pulse. And now with over 3 years until the 2028 general elections, the NPP secession race is already heating up, rekindling rivalries and sparking fierce debate over who can reclaim power as the politically jokery intensifies. Even potential contenders are caught in the crossfire. Former Vice President and 2024 flag bearer Dr. Muhammadu Bawumia recently cited historical precedents to justify a second bid for leadership. But allies of Kennedy Japan have swiftly rejected that claim, arguing that party tradition allows for exceptions and that defeat doesn't guarantee a comeback. The exchange has reignited tensions in the party, still reeling from a crushing electoral loss, raising fresh questions about unity, loyalty, and the road to political redemption. But what does history actually say? Let's put on the screen some data so far as to what has been the trajectory for the presidential election results from 1992 to 2024 just recently. And you see on your screen the trajectory. The next slide would give us a better insight on who has made some better progress on, and of course you can see that the blue will be the color for the NPP. But the second slide, which you're just going to see, would be the national-wide delegates elections and how delegates have voted over the years as well. On your screen would be the color blue and red. Now let's go through it. You recall that in 1992, Albert Eduboahen was the first ever candidate that was presented. And a little later, in 1996, J.A. Kufuor was presented, because if you read the history, it will be recording that Albert Eduboahen didn't perform to the expectation of the party. Now, in 1996, J.A. Kufuor was presented, and in 1998, he won by 64.6%. And then you will have in 2007, Nana Akufo-Addo attempted. And then in 2010, again by 78, and you see the margin that as they went a little higher, their margins were increasing. And from 78, in 2014, Nana Akufo-Addo also performed with a 94%. And then when we got to 2023, 61% for Bawumia, which is where the debate has been starting, that, well, the performance will then show that if you didn't perform better, there shouldn't be a comeback for you. And then others have also said that, of course, many people or many flag bearers did not win at the first attempt, and when they came back, they did a lot better. And you can see that trajectory as well for ex-President Akufo-Addo. And so the question is, should Bawumia be given another opportunity because of the history of NPP or not? Joining me in studio is spokesperson for Kennedy Japan's camp, I should say, and he's a lawyer, Kwesi Kwarteng. Also joining me a little later, if you're able to reach him, is Dennis Miracles Abuaji, who also speaks for the Bawumia camp. How have you been feeling, and how have you been feeling with your new role from speaking for a government to an individual? How have you been?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to you and your viewers. So far, so good. They say once a soldier, always a soldier. Okay. You just have to, in science you call something adaptability, your ability to adapt to new roles, new events, new circumstances. Transiting from Ministry of Education to speaking for Honorable Kennedy Japan is almost the same, because at the end of the day, you are all projecting politically exposed people who, the only difference is that one happens to be more of an institution, but whichever way that institution was being headed by a politician or a politically exposed person. So I don't see my difference. It's just about having convictions and believing in what you can.
Imperial, for you to speak for somebody or a product or a service, you definitely must believe in that person, that the person is a sellable one, or the service is a sellable one, or the product is good enough, is fit for purpose. Among all the flag bearership and the debate that has been, coming up, why did you join the camp of Kennedy?
Well, I mean, just with the hindsight of having read social media pursuant to this conversation, I want to waive the whole idea of a debate and make it a discussion because of the understanding out there that as soon as we say debate, we are coming to fight among ourselves. No, we are having a discussion about our party and how we can move forward.
Well, if spokespersons don't debate, still, I mean, the public will debate anyway.
I agree, but I mean, like I indicated, with hindsight of what is going on social media in relation to this particular event, where it was presented as though myself and my good brother Miracles are going to debate as if we are going to fight amongst ourselves. I mean, that is what I want to water down the impact to viewers and party faithfuls out there. That no, it's just a point of discussion. It's just an exchange of ideas, and of course, an exchange of selling your message and the vision that your candidate presents. But of course, now to your substantive question about why I am supporting Kennedy Jà. I'm not going to give you much theory, just like Kennedy himself, who is a very practical man. I'm supporting the Honorable Kennedy Jà because I am of the view that he can win us power in 2028. End of story.
Why? I mean, you have seen the trajectory. Maybe a little in a subsequent bulletin, we'll go in depth and how we came up with that data. But you can see clearly that it's very hard for somebody to go once and then they will win. They'll get the bid and then they'll win.
Talking about the general election?
Well, for general elections, I mean, for internal party or flag bearership races, we have seen that any person who didn't do well, when they come back, they actually did better. Would you say no to that?
Well, let me put it within this perspective. The conversation is more geared towards even the general election than even at the party level, because whichever with the party level, whoever gets to win is presented as a candidate for the party in the general election. What is in dispute has to do with whether or not people have come once in the general elections and have won. And there are precedents to that. Reference can be made to former President Jerry Rawlings. He came once and he won. Also, President Mahama, he also came once and he won. But of course, when you narrow the conversation to the NPP alone, we've not had a precedent where a candidate has been presented on just first basis and that candidate has won. So yes, I agree on that level. And let me state categorically that our argument is not to suggest or say that candidates who wants to come again on the party sector or contest at the primary level should not be given the opportunity. Everybody deserves a second chance. But what Kennedy Jà seeks to tell Ghanaians is just to give a historical account and the historical perspective of our electoral trajectory. And reference has been made to President Kufuor, President Rawlings, and of course, it's also important to also add that of our former leader, Professor Dubois. So, looking at all this context, yes, you can come again. But most times, if you look at the caveat upon which the party people have been basing on to make a determination on whether or not they are presenting such a candidate again, has always been benchmark on performance. And history will be the best guide for all of us. For instance, if you look at the case of that of Professor Dubois, from history, you realize that he was in the days of dark, had to campaign more or less against a military regime which was just on the verge of transiting to democracy, came into an election, had very few short space to prepare. Yes, still the party people felt like in the general election, his performance was not very impressive. And for that reason, they jettisoned him and replaced him with President Kufuor. In the case of President Kufuor, when President Kufuor came in 96, of course, the 96 general election, he lost. But the caveat has always been benchmark on performance. And so the party people then felt that he performed creditably well in the general elections, just opposing his performance to the time that he had, or he even finished his primaries. President Kufuor's primaries was around April thereabout. Ordinarily, you have to select your vice presidential candidate using about 3-4 months. So practically, Kufuor started campaigning in August, September thereabout, which means essentially he had about 3 months because those times the elections was in November. Yes, so he put a very strong performance and was able to garner about 39% votes. On that note, the party people believed that, well, based on the signals that he's been able to demonstrate, he was marketable, he was sellable, and then when we present him again, he was going to win. Again, if you move from beyond President Kufuor and also come to former President Akufo-Addo, in the case of Akufo-Addo, he had not even had that great time or opportunity to market himself. The highest office that President Akufo-Addo has ever held was a Minister of State. Yesterday, when he came in his first attempt during the general elections, he was able to, his popularity was able to jettison and springboard the party to run off, to the extent that we even lost the election at time with about 23,000 difference. The second time we even had to go to court, where party people strongly felt that the man has won, and maybe due to more practices and irregularities. It was then that he made that profound statement that I disagree with the decision of the court, but I accept same. And so he had also demonstrated very strongly that indeed when you present him again, he had the capacity to win the general elections for us. But I mean, Ken's argument bordered on the fact that if you juxtapose the case of President Akufo-Addo, if you juxtapose the case of President Kufuor to that of our former candidate and former Vice President, Dr. Alhaji Bawumia, clearly you can see that the 1.7 million votes difference, and context is also very important, especially when about our votes comparing to 2020 was reduced to about 2.1 million votes difference. Clearly, you realize that such a performance is not a performance that is so remarkable that the party people may say that, well, we are giving you a second chance. It is not, I'm landing. It is not in any way to suggest that he cannot contest for the primaries. He can. Everybody deserves a second chance.
We're talking about who can win.
Yeah, who can win.
Actually, in 2028. I mean, but what do you say to the many reports that have come? I mean, there have been committees, and I like to reference the Ashanti region report mainly. And we do not take away the ex-president. Many have said that Bawumia is actually paying for the sins of the ex-president. And so if he's a standalone person, then he will do better. I've got Miracles of Waja joining me via phone on this conversation. Miracles, thank you for joining us. And so what's really the camp? What is the Bawumia camp saying?
What's happening? Who's in the studio, please?
Well, of course, your colleague is Kwesi Kwati is in the studio.
Oh, I mean, in all humility, I would ask that you advise Kwesi to seize this conversation and get back into his constituency, Asante Atim North, for us to finish our rebuilding, our restructuring. It's too early. This is completely needless.
Which part of the conversation is needless?
Why are we discussing NPP primaries by this time, when we have a lot going on in rebuilding our party?
But the conversation is already on social media.
No, it is not. It is not. The party has calendar. The party has set a plan in steel. As we speak, the party is planning and working towards constitutional reforms. There's a conference coming up in July. What is he doing? Why?
Have you yourself not admitted that Bawumia deserves a second chance?
When did where?
In any way or form, directly or indirectly?
Where? Why would you spend this precious airtime that we have from multimedia when we can be discussing the nurses who are on strike?
We have extensively. We have just gone by before we went on a break.
We are not interested. And I'll give you a very good advice to my brother Kwesi Kwati, that he should seize these things. He's not the one
setting any tone for the conversation.
Himself. Can you also allow me to speak, please? I'm not sure you expect me to say exactly what you want to say. I am saying that, in all humility, Mr. Kwesi Kwati, if I were him, I would seize this conversation around our internal contest and go to my constituency to help with the rebuilding process. That's what I'm saying.
What are we rebuilding? Let's talk about the rebuilding. What are we rebuilding for?
Nobody told me that this is what you're going to do. Otherwise, I would have called him to advise him not to even show up. We need to focus. We need to concentrate. That is what we are planning to do as a political party. And these things simply distract us. There will be time for this conversation.
I'm of the firm belief that my producer engaged you on this particular conversation.
No, he did
and you
not.
agreed?
He did not tell me this is what we're going to do. He never told me that.
What was the briefing you had?
If he had told me,
what was the briefing you had, Miracles?
I would have advised against it.
What briefing did you have to agree to come on?
When he called me, he didn't tell me there was going to be a debate on internal elections and you're going to have Kwesi Kwarteng and Miracles debating
around
our internal
elections. What did he say to you? Let's just have a conversation. What did he say to you? We can have a conversation on whatever briefing he gave you. What briefing did he give you?
He called me and he mentioned that there's been a comment that has been made. About the NPP, and so he will call me during the pause for me to react. He didn't tell me we were going to have internal debate on NPP internal elections. That's what he called me to tell me. And I am refusing to be part of such conversation. I think it's premature. I think it's unwarranted. And I would use your platform to advise all our party people that we should stay focused and not be distracted. There's a roadmap, there's a plan by the party. When it is time for these internal debates and contests, we will do it.
If the general public is interested as well? If the general public is interested as well?
No, but I think it's premature. We have our plan. We have our calendar as a party. Right now, we are working towards constitutional reforms and then working towards a conference in July. When it's time for presidential primaries, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia will come out and every form of debate will be held.
But right now, the former vice president himself has made comments nearly about this. You think it's still premature?
He made a comment about what?
That he deserves a second chance.
When did he say that? Do you have him on tape? When did he say that? What the vice president has been doing has been to move around with the party to thank the people of this country and thank the party people and work with them to rebuild the party. So what is Kwesi Kwarteng doing? That we are in June. As we speak, our responsibility as an opposition party is to put the government on its toes. They have introduced Doomsday levy. We need to talk to them to withdraw it. Nurses are on strike. We need to appeal to the government to intervene so they get back. And then we use the precious airtime that multimedia is.
Miracles, are you in any way saying that in any of the vice president's interaction, thank you tours, anything at all, he has not in anything said anything that is directly or indirectly about
this? Is a multimedia studio a venue for a thank you tour for the new people?
Of course, Miracles. You want to situate this conversation better because we talk about anything that is newsworthy.
If the vice president or the general secretary or anybody in the party meets party people and they're having a party conversation and it comes up, I will not have an issue with it. I will not be complaining. But I am saying that it is premature. It is completely not in the interest of the new patriotic party to be having such debates in the media.
All right, thank you.
It's wrong.
Thank you for your attention then. We're still of the firm belief that this is a conversation that has sparked anyway, and the general public is quite interested in this. This is why we're having this conversation. But if Miracles is not ready to have that conversation, of course it's not a debate, and of course we can have healthy debates. So what's your reaction? They say that you should focus in your constituency and the resetting agenda.
Well, let me state that I have always maintained my stance and my composure that first I'm an NPP even before I aligned with any other candidate or any other hopeful. And so in as much as I may want to advance the cause of that hopeful or that candidate, I'm also mindful that I need to also keep my home and protect my home. But I wish to say that when you set standards for principles, we have to remind ourselves that they are not seasonal. And I'm not sure I have the capacity to determine your editorial policy. You also don't pick editorial policies just based on a vacuum.
Of course not.
And certainly it's based on commentaries around and comments that has been made by, even for the purpose of this conversation, politically exposed persons. Well, it's true that Miracle is right when he's indicated that it may not be time for campaign. But as a principal person, he should have said this when his boss, Dr. Bawumia, went to Takrady and tried to shift blame and suggest that there was a time where even 3 days to election, we increased fuel and it was meant as though it was designed for him to lose an election. So you cannot play the all-straight game. and come on TV and pretend to be holier than thou and ask me to go into my constituency. Has he been in his constituency? When was the last time he visited his constituency? So I want to be measured on this, but I just want to say that even Kennedy Japan speaking did not speak out of a vacuum. He spoke in reaction to a certain history that has been put forth by Dr. Bawumia, his boss. And Kennedy's reaction was to give a proper context and a very factual account to the history, a leg of the history that has been buried, when Dr. Bawumia made a point that in NPP nobody has been made to go only once, but has been 2 or 3 occasions. You see,
was it not the elections they were talking about, or this was another ceremony that
no, I mean, about? During his thank you to, he made such remarks, even to the extent that he had to, when he even went to lunch.
Which is what has warranted this conversation.
Nobody's speaking out of a vacuum. You see, what Miracle faced to understand that NPP is an intellectual party, is a party of intellectuals, and synonymous with party of intellectuals. As soon as you put out something, it opens room for discussion, criticisms, and debate. When your boss suggests to party people, as though in the history of NPP, no presidential candidate has been made to go for primaries once, what does it do in an intellectual community? It opens room for discussion. So it is not out of place, and it is also not wrong when a candidate or any other person who has interest in also running for similar office also sees that, well, as soon as you bring this debate, then there is also another leg of the debate where we may also have to let the party people also know that, well, in the case of Professor Dubois, he went once. And even those instances or those references that has been made by Dr. Bawumia, they were caveated on performance. I mean, I don't think this is so much of a big deal. And I'm surprised why he's making this as though we cannot criticize the NDC, and still advance the cause of the NPP. Primaries and selecting a candidate is not an event, it's a process. Certainly, when you go into an opposition, it requires rebuilding, it requires regrouping, it requires criticisms, it requires taking responsibility. And of course, even to the extent that you also have to, this whole thank you to is also part of the process.
You mentioned the resetting agenda. Currently, what is with the resetting agenda?
I don't know. I don't speak for him. Maybe he may be able to explain it further. But the point I'm trying to make is that restructuring a party is not an event where you get up and only wait for an election calendar and say that, well, in January or March 2026 we are going for an election. It's process where you may have a thank you tour, where comments will be made. Those comments, I think they should be tolerant enough.
I mean, finally, before we just have 3 minutes to wrap the show. Finally,
make a point. They should be tolerant for interrogations and discussions.
NPP has tried Bawumia. Why do you think they should try a candidate they don't know, they have uncertainty for? If you're a business owner, would you take that decision?
I mean, it's a skewed question anyway. But if you're a business owner and you present the candidate and the outcome is that 2.1 million people, you see, again, context is very important,
right?
And you need to lay the foundation. In the case of former Vice President Dr. Bawumia, he has had the opportunity to even market himself for about 16 years, 8 years as a vice presidential candidate and 8 years as a vice president. Yes, went into an election and lost about 1.7 million votes. Interestingly, out of 276 constituencies, about 199 constituencies, we lost there. And if you as the candidate bring some of these conversations up, essentially making a case or advancing a case that you have to be given an opportunity to go again, I don't think you should dismiss it when people bring your own data, your own performance, and remind you that in the case of the NPP, conversations like this are pivoted on the performance of the candidate. So they can.
I'm certain there's more weeks and more months to discuss this a lot more on the Joy News channel. Of course, we'll be coming to you whenever there are more comments to spark a debate. Of course, and thank you for joining us today.
But I want to end. I want to end on this note.
The show has actually ended.
If indeed, Miracle's purported advice was genuine, I'm sure he saw the flyers earlier. And again, Nobody.
I mean, of course. I mean, I want to state categorically that Miracles Abuaji was engaged prior to this, and of course, we cannot book you for you to walk in here.
Which TV station put somebody on the flyer without the person's consent?
So
which TV station?
I'm certain that people.
So he could have called me. He saw the flyer.
We broadcast to very discerning.
If the said advice was genuine, I'm sure he could have called me and given it to me.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Chris, for joining us.
Set standards and the same standards, you betrayed them.
Well, thank you for joining us today, and thank you as well for joining us and for watching the show today. There's more.
Ebushafo we de wankasa ode waso ati edweni ehu nia ekoso ewo yemai Ghana mu ene mesho se ko comment section na fa comment no ebrem na mejibre akenkan ede ama ofefefe aha eye Ghanatube so insema ekoso ena onsa ebeka on subscribe ya subscribe na hit notification bell no for more news updates see ade akamo